Hello and welcome to part 1, Python programming in 5 minutes. This version of Python tutorials will be focused on the Python programming language as it is used in the field of data science. First, let's talk about the IDE, that's Integrated Development Environment. We'll be making use of Google Colab, which is a hosted version of Jupyter Notebooks. This lets you rapidly prototype using a browser. I have a browser open, so I'll just type Google Colab into a search bar to get started. With Colab open, we're ready to start writing some code. We'll learn more about various features and functionality of Colab as we go along. Let's start by looking at variables in Python. Variables are simply placeholders for things that will change in our code. Usually we give them a meaningful name, but in this example, I'll just define a variable called A, and I'll assign a value to it. Now, to execute this code, I can hit Command and Enter or Control and Enter if I'm on Windows. I can also alternatively click the button. Now, the first time you run Colab, it takes a few seconds before it gets started because it's starting up something called a runtime. The runtime allocates a virtual computer to you. Okay, this green check mark shows that our variable has been declared and it has a value, but there's no output. And that's not a mistake. That's simply because we didn't ask the Python interpreter to provide an output to us. Now, if you've programmed in some other programming language, you will find that you do not need to declare a variable type. However, the variable type is implicitly defined. So we can ask the interpreter to tell us the type that was implied when we did this assignment. And you can ignore all of the suggestions that come up. So to find out the type of our variable A, we'll run our code cell again. And now we see that A, our variable, is defined as an integer. Now we can go ahead and make this declaration a floating point number. And how we can do that is by assigning a floating point number such as 2.0. And when we run our cell, our output data type will be a floating point number. Now, while we carry out a lot of operations with integers and floating point numbers, it's also possible to work with strings. And to do that, let's declare another variable and assign to it a string type. And when we run this cell, we will see that our variable is of type string, which is str. Now, when we output using print, we're also able to format our strings. And we're going to see an example of that right away. Now, what we output is a string, but that string also contains A, which, if you've been following along, you'll expect is an integer. So we can go ahead and execute the cell, and we can see that the value of A is 1. And what we do here is we use a placeholder, and then we use format to pass that in. So that's a brief introduction to variables.